Hello everyone and welcome back to another reaction. Today we're taking a look at part 4 of Extra History's Conquest of India series. So without further ado, let's get going.
February 13th, 1788. The House of Commons, the House of Lords, members of the royal family, foreign dignitaries, historians, and socialites are packed into the Palace of Westminster. But they aren't here for a monumental vote, or a declaration of war, or even a coronation. They're here for an impeachment trial. The defendant is Warren Hastings, who until recently was the East India Company's top man in Bengal. He stands accused of a litany of crimes, including embezzlement, extortion, dueling his political rivals, and the illegal killing of a Maharaja. And leading the prosecution against Hastings is the so-called father of modern conservatism, Edmund Burke. Hastings' alleged crimes were so numerous that it took Burke a full 2 days to introduce and explain each of the charges. And the trial itself eventually required 148 days of meetings over the course of 7 years. Sounds excessive, right?
That's quite an impeachment trial, I must say.
Well, consider this. What was at stake wasn't just Warren's reputation, but rather the past, present, and future of the British Empire in India. Thanks so much to CuriosityStream for helping us tell today's historical tale. Thanks to the Diwani, the East India Company had become the de facto rulers of Bengal. And this change was so sudden and unexpected that it represented a real-time paradox for the people of India and Britain. In India, they described the event using the Persian word inquilab, which translates roughly to topsy-turvy or a surprising inversion of the existing order. As one Mughal poet put it, the revolution in Bengal left those who rode elephants as beggars in the streets, while it elevated the beggars into palaces. The British were equally caught off guard by these events. Most of Britain's attention in the 18th century had been focused on Europe and America, and now they turned around in 1765 to discover that the EIC, the company that was always on the verge of going bankrupt, now controlled a region with a higher population and landmass than Britain itself.
Yeah, that's must have been quite a worrying development for the British Crown that this company is maybe growing a bit too big for its britches.
And it's important to remember how the company gained this power. On its surface, the EIC was a trading company, but in reality, it had become a private security firm that operated a bit like the mafia. They built up their paid sepoy armies, sold protection to the highest local bidder, and when those customers couldn't pay, the EIC demanded, and usually got, taxation rights. Why, good sir, what a fine and majestic subcontinental region you have here. 'Twould be a pity if something were to happen to it. Afterward, the EIC could use said taxes to build up their military power more and force their way into new territories, thus increasing their profits. And in the word...
And this is what we call a feedback loop. More taxation leads to more armies, which leads to more taxation, which leads to more armies, and so on and so forth. It's quite an ingenious system they managed to set up here. But again, this is a company, not a country.
Of one EIC officer, the EIC eventually destroys every government that it seeks to protect. How's that for a paradox, huh?
Okay, so this is a paradox, I get that. But if it was an absurdity at the time, why didn't anyone do anything about it?
Oh, a lot of people tried, especially in India. As you know, there were the combined attempts by the Nawab of Bengal and the Mughal emperor that ended at Buxar. There was a series of wars between the EIC and the Maratha Confederacy in central India, and there were the wars between the EIC and the state of Mysore in the southwest, led by Tipu Sultan, who you can learn more about over in our Nebula original. But even though these native forces put up stiff resistance, they were eventually overcome by the EIC's disciplined sepoy armies and their local allies, who were often deep in the EIC's pockets. Now, a lot of people who study this...
Yes, I can imagine that a local army of sorts, they had local knowledge of the area, trained in the Western style, equipped with Western weapons, had quite an advantage over local forces. I may be wrong, and then you guys can leave a comment, but it seems to be that way to me.
History are constantly frustrated by the lack of unity between Indian states threatened by the EIC. Why didn't they just work together to stop the British? I mean, they possessed equal technology and vastly greater numbers after all. But the problem with this...
Well, yes, I was contradicted almost immediately.
This type of analysis is that it projects modern notions of nationalism on the past. There was no such thing as a united Indian nation at this time. Heck, even Britain barely qualified as a modern nation in the 18th century, especially with the Scots and Irish constantly looking to overthrow English rule. Another barrier of Indian resistance involved the EIC's behavior. When thinking about imperial takeover, we usually get caught up in images conjured from science fiction, where an obviously evil foreign entity, wearing all black and accompanied by some super scary marching music, mercilessly destroys a resistance. But successful empires are more insidious than that, requiring acceptance and cooperation from the ruled. And the key to the EIC's success in India involved finding and keeping said collaborators. But how'd they do this? Well, turns out the exact same way the Mughal Empire had over the previous centuries. They practiced indirect rule. You find regional leaders who are willing to make a deal, and then you leave them in control of their own fiefdoms in exchange for a substantial cut of the revenues. And if your collaborator ever gets out of line, you simply eliminate them and find a new local leader interested in the top spot. The EIC attempted, as much as possible, to maintain the illusion that they were just another regional power in India, just like the Maratha Confederacy or Mysore. They even worked to prop up the Mughal emperor in Delhi, not because they were worried about his strength, but because they wanted to maintain the idea that nothing in India had really changed. As one historian put it,
It's quite ingenious when you think about it. But yes, this is a famous divide and conquer strategy. You practice indirect rule, and therefore it looks like, well, I'm just hanging out here in Bengal. I'm not really expanding now, am I? But in reality, through these indirect rulers who are really vassals of the EIC, the company can control vast amounts of territory. And, don't have any of the responsibility of governing these provinces. So, yeah, it's quite the story, isn't it?
the EIC became Indian rulers. They won power through Indian political processes, and their rule depended on the yield of Indian taxation levied through Indian administrative systems. The British succeeded because they didn't act like a foreign conqueror. Or to put it another and more dramatic way, the greatest trick the devil ever played was convincing the world he didn't exist. But who were these devils in control of the EIC on the ground in India? Well, that takes us right back to our defendant at the top of the episode, Warren Hastings. Hastings came from a broken home and found in India the opportunities for power and fortune that would have eluded him back in Britain. Beginning in 1750, at the age of 17, Hastings quickly worked his way up the EIC's corporate ladder, thanks to his skills as a bureaucrat, an accountant, a linguist, and most importantly, a survivor, who managed to overcome the high British mortality rate in India due to disease. His skills and immune system allowed Hastings to become the de facto EIC governor of Bengal in 1772, a position he would hold until 1785. There, Warren emphasized the principle of indirect rule. He attempted to mimic not only the methods of Mughal emperors, but also their culture. He elevated and befriended local leaders, and he personally managed diplomatic meetings in Urdu rather than using an interpreter. He also became a patron of local arts and culture, unlike leaders in Britain, who were largely dismissive of Indian culture.
A very impressive man, it seems. Yes, if you want to control a foreign territory, one of the best ways of going about it is actually embracing the territory's culture and traditions and language. And it's there has been many examples of this, some more successful than others. The one I'm most familiar is Joseph Bonaparte, who was the king of Spain during the Napoleonic Wars. He actually tried to learn the Spanish language, he tried to adopt Spanish customs, he tried to adhere to Spanish religion, Catholicism. Of course, there were other circumstances at play that prevented him from being a successful ruler of Spain, but you get my point. It was a good thought, and it seems like Hastings has succeeded quite brilliantly at this over in India.
Hastings believed that an appreciation of Indian civilization would be key to managing the empire. Though this policy of ruling like a Mughal didn't mean it was beneficial for everyone involved. Through these policies, Hastings and other company men in India, called nabobs, became fabulously wealthy as they funneled land revenues and kickbacks from local leaders into their own coffers. Meaning, it was not at all uncommon for an EIC employee to send home 3 times his yearly salary from private trading and gifts from Indian leaders. And this exorbitant transferal of wealth caused a significant financial drain on India because the nabobs rarely invested these personal fortunes, again accrued almost completely from Indian taxes, back into India itself.
Yes, and isn't that the whole point why we pay taxes? The whole point behind taxes is that a society can maintain a certain, depending on where you live, a certain standard with regards to infrastructure, welfare, and other societal systems. But if all of this money is just being exported back to Britain, then yeah, you could see how India is being squeezed dry pretty quickly here.
It's kind of like if an American-based company that specialized in 2-day shipping decided to invest its money in corporate space travel rather than worker wages. But what do I know? I'm just a cartoon on the internet.
Oh, yeah. He's not wrong there, Amazon does not want to invest into their workers, raising their wages or whatnot. They'll take the money and, use it to make more money, basically. So, yeah, it's a tragic state, isn't it?
Simultaneously, like any good mafioso, the nabobs showed a complete disregard for common Indians in pursuit of profit. They wanted their land revenues, or else. This caused local Indian collaborators to push ordinary cultivators to the breaking point, growing cash crops instead of food, a policy that led to a significant famine in 1770 that claimed the lives of an estimated 10 million people.
Jesus.
This famine, along with the tales of corruption swirling around the EIC, led the British government to examine the company's work, and in particular, the poster boy for the nabob era, Warren Hastings. And while Hastings himself was eventually acquitted on all charges, the damage to the company's profile caused by the impeachment trial itself was severe. So, under the East India Company Act of 1784, the operations of the EIC were brought under the direct supervision of the British government. The EIC remained nominally in charge, but the days of unfettered corruption had come to an end.
Okay, now with the evil EIC out of the picture.
Yes, and this impeachment trial was very convenient, of course, for the government, who was now able to exploit the riches of India for its own purposes. Not like some sort of benevolent ruler came in and stopped the corruption. No, but they eliminated the EIC, which was quickly becoming a, almost a rival nation to its home country, Britain. And now Britain gets to take a share in the profits directly.
The common cultivator is saved, and they all lived happily ever after.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, Army, you sweet summer sofa. Not even close. Things are about to get much, much worse. But that's
Britain's imperial track record is anything but good, and given the experiences in Ireland, for example, I don't imagine that the governance of India would be much better. But that's the story for the next episode. So if you have any comments, please leave them down below. I'm always interested in hearing more context about all of these events, since I'm not really read up on this part of history at all. And if you liked the video, please leave a like and subscribe for more. And I'll see you guys next time.